Expected points, clean sheet odds, captaincy, and the best players to buy. This video has got all the information you need to know ahead of game week 32. All right, we're going to start off by looking at the top players for expected points by position, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I have in previous game weeks. We're still going to look at the single game week picture, but I've also put together a view of the next three as well. I feel like just looking short term at one game week doesn't necessarily fully help you, understand players that you want to bring in, because ultimately you've got to look two or three, at least 3 game weeks in the future for making transfers, I think. But looking solely at game week 32 to begin with, the top player for expected points is Kelleher of Liverpool, 4.6 against Man United. I think Liverpool still have pretty decent clean sheet odds, and Kelleher has been making a decent number of saves pretty much every time he's stepped out onto a football pitch. Martinez is in second place for Villa, although Olsen started the fixture in game week 31, so I would say definitely one to keep an eye on if he's actually fit and ready to go. We've got Vicario in third place, Pickford, David Raya, who personally I think is probably the best goalkeeper in FPL right now, Petrovic, Neto, who's definitely up there as one of the best, Jose Sarr and Leno for game week 32. Looking at the next 3 game weeks then, and I would say the expected points is a little bit skewed by Kelleher. I think, yes, obviously he's a great option if he plays all of those games, and I'd probably agree with the expected points if he did. Unfortunately, Alisson is due back anytime soon. I'm pretty sure he's already in training. So Kelleher's time in the Liverpool team was days and numbered, basically. And I do expect Alisson to either be back, probably not for the fixture, because I'm recording this before the fixture in 31. Don't expect him to be back in 31. It could well be back for the Man United fixture. I believe that Man United game was when they were always targeting getting him back anyway. So yeah, Kelleher looks good on paper, but you'd have to question if he's going to play all of those games. David Raya is the second best, and like I said, I think he is my favourite goalkeeper in the game right now. Brighton Villa, Arsenal could conceivably keep 2 clean sheets in those games. Back-to-back clean sheets now against Luton and Man City. They've kept the most clean sheets of any team in the league, and he's got a double game week in 34. So really like him as an option. Pickford, Jose Sarr and Neto, I'd say those 3 are decent. The one point kind of comparing the two, Raya and those 3 keepers, kind of take your pick of those 3 keepers. I don't think there's a whole lot to separate them. They're going to make more saves than Raya does, is the only thing. So Raya, it's kind of clean sheet or bust, although obviously the clean sheets are coming thick and fast at the moment. Whereas the other goalkeepers, if they concede, they still have a bit of a backup in terms of potentially getting saves bonus as well. Personally, my favourite goalkeepers in FPL are the ones that not only keep an average amount of clean sheets, but make a lot of saves, so they consistently get saves bonus every game. And Neto, I think he's on, we'll talk about him later in the video, but I'm pretty sure he's on 7 clean sheets now for the season. He's got Luton, admittedly Man United, but most people have a couple of goalkeepers in their team at the moment, don't they? So you could rotate 2 goalkeepers for that one. And then a double game week in 34, and he's decent for saves as well. So I say Raya and Neto are a couple of my favourite keepers in the game at the moment. Like I said, Martinez, you kind of got to keep an eye on him. Onana is the top keeper that doesn't have a double game week in 34. He's got Bournemouth at home, which isn't too bad of a fixture. He does, of course, play Liverpool in game week 32. But on the whole, he's a pretty decent keeper as well. Going up and up in price, but I don't mind him. He keeps a decent amount of clean sheets. Man United, despite all the problems you might say they have, are still pretty frugal when it comes to conceding goals. I think Onana's got 8 clean sheets for the season at the time of recording this video, which is the second most of any team and any keeper in the league. So I don't mind him as well, and he's keeping making a decent amount of saves. I wouldn't touch Verbruggen, the other Liverpool goalkeeper there, not worth it, and Sheffield United keeper, nowhere near. On to the defenders then, and for game week 32, Pedro Porro leads the way for expected points. Ben White in second place, 8 Nori, who started at left wing and did really well in game week 31. Could have had a couple of goals, he literally could have scored a brace in that game. John Stones, I'd question if he's going to start. I'd probably say Guardiola is probably the best Man City defender right now, just with the expected minutes and such. Udogie and Romero, Akanji, Kivior and Gabriel are your top defenders for game week 32. Just a quick look at over the next 3 game weeks, and Ben White, according to DraftHound, he is the top defender for expected points, and I'd say it's pretty close between him and Gabriel personally. Those two are my favourite defenders in the game right now, and Ben White, he's miles ahead, isn't he, when you look at those expected points? I just think he's a little bit more attacking in terms of open play than the other Arsenal defenders, but I'd say Gabriel is more of a goal threat from set pieces. So position-wise, White plays more advanced, obviously, but Gabriel is definitely more of a threat from set pieces. They're obviously probably going to start the same amount of games and obviously keep the same number of clean sheets. Aït-Nouri, like I said, I really like Aït-Nouri. Scored a goal in game week 31. I'm pretty sure he's on 5 returns for Wolves in all competitions in his last 6 games. West Ham and Forest up next. I think 2 decent fixtures. And then a double game week in 34. And let's not forget, he started at left wing in game week 31. So, you know, with the injuries that Wolves have, wouldn't rule out him starting in that position again, because he did have a really good game in that spot. Kiwior, I had a few people asking me about Kiwior on my deadline streams. At 4.4 million for an Arsenal defender, you might be thinking it's worth the risk, but I just don't know. I just don't think he's nailed enough to start all the games. I still got to say, I have a kind of controversial opinion on Connor Bradley, the next player on that list. Now, Trent is definitely due to come back for Liverpool, no doubt in my mind, but how likely, let me know in the comments, how likely do you think the two of them, Bradley and Trent, could start in the same team? I think Bradley has played so well at right back that it's going to be really hard to displace him. I think, you know, if I was Klopp, I'd try and squeeze Trent into the midfield and keep Bradley playing at right back, because I just think he's been so good there. That's my view. That's why I went for him on my wild card. But obviously, there's a risk with Trent coming back that he doesn't start. But he's up there as one of the top defenders. See Virgil van Dijk. I mean, if you want a Liverpool defender, he's probably the pick of the bunch. He's just going to play every game, isn't he? And he's won the most aerial duels in the league this season by a long shot. And yes, aerial duels, whatever. But it does mean that from, you know, in the opponent's box from set pieces, he's really dangerous and pretty much wins all his headers. So I got a feeling there's a goal to come sometime soon for him. John Stones is up there again. I'd probably say Guardiola, given all the injuries that Man City have on the left side of their defence. I'd say he's probably the pick of the Man City defenders. I wouldn't recommend picking a Man City defender. They're conceding pretty much every game. And you still, even then, you know, I said Guardiola's the most nailed. Even then, you don't know if he's going to play every game. Tomiyasu, same applies with Kiwior. Adam Smith for Bournemouth, I don't mind at that price, but I think if you're in and around that budget, Aït-Nouri is your man. On to the midfielders then, and the top midfielder for expected points in game week 32 for Draft Hound is Cole Palmer. He's got the best fixture of the bunch by far, Sheffield United away. It's a good fixture, isn't it? I mean, we'll talk about captaincy in a bit more detail in a second, because I think there's 4 players you could conceivably captain. The 3 top midfielders you can see here, Palmer, Son and Salah, I think are all decent options. Then you've got to chuck in Haaland as well, who obviously we'll get to. According to Draft Hound, Palmer is the top midfielder for expected points, sits on 7.8. Son closely behind, 7.6. Salah on 6.9. Brennan Johnson, who is in pretty good goal scoring form for Spurs at the moment, on 5.9. Although I'd question if he still starts ahead of Richarlison for 32. I just think he's played a lot of minutes, and Richarlison, you know the kind of reputation he comes with, and the form he was in for Spurs before his injury. So I think it could be a risk that Johnson gets benched for Richarlison in 32. Don't quote me on that, but I just think it's a risk. Odegaard, I don't mind him as an option. He's going to play every game for Arsenal. Brighton away is a decent fixture for them. Brighton, they are prone. I'm probably going to keep a clean sheet in game week 31, but I think they're prone to conceding goals, and Arsenal could have a good game there. Foden, who's just scored a hat-trick, is at the time of talking about this in game week 31. Luis Diaz, Havertz and Maddison are your top midfielders. And then just wanted to do a quick 3-week view. I mean, it's no surprise to see Salah as the number 1. Man United, Crystal Palace in a double game week coming up. The second best is apparently Odegaard. Saka is a little bit behind, which is quite interesting. The Draft Town algorithm doesn't seem to like Saka all that much. But for me, I'd still always go back to, I think Saka is the best of the Arsenal midfielders. Even though he didn't feature in game week 31, I think he's going to be back for game week 32. I just think he's the best of the Arsenal midfielders. Although, of course, I'll admit, I have to keep an eye on that injury news. Luis Diaz is up there for Liverpool. I think he's a perfectly decent pick. He looks really dangerous, but one thing I would say, he's kind of missing that final ball and real end product. He's given defenders all kinds of issues with his pace and his ability on the ball, but he's just missing that cutting pass and finish. Whether he can find that form, you know, ahead of game week 32 remains to be seen, but I do like him as an option. He certainly passes the eye test, but he's just not getting as many returns as I think I'd want. Havertz I don't mind as an option as well. I mean, obviously Cole Palmer's great. Cole Palmer, he's not a fraud, but he's a bit of a misnomer in there in the sense that he doesn't have a double game week in 34, but he's still one of the top midfielders. I mean, I'm probably going to captain him in game week 32, to be honest. He's that good, and obviously he's good for future game weeks, and I wouldn't be too worried about starting him in 34 if I needed to. McAllister, who's in good returns, like form in terms of attacking returns recently, he's a decent option. Martinelli, Sarabia, who could well, excuse me, could well be the Wolves penalty taker. I think if Cunha's in the team, he may well take them. Although I believe that Cunha, when Cunha and Sarabia were both on the pitch, Sarabia took the last Wolves penalty. Don't quote me on that, but let me know in the comments if you know any more. Don't think you can pick Declan Rice above the other Arsenal assets. On to the forwards. Haaland leads the way for game week 32. Crystal Palace away, 6.7 expected points for him. Isak, 5.4 against Fulham. He's in really good form at the moment, isn't he? The one thing I would say about Isak, and I've mentioned it in my buy and avoid video, yes, he's in great form, but I think he's as likely to get a 10-point haul as he is to come off with an injury. I do think that's the kind of thing you're going to get with Isak. But if you've got him at the moment, I mean, fair play to you, and you're certainly reaping the rewards of his points. Solanke, I personally prefer him to Isak, given he's got a double in 34. He's just nailed for 90 minutes on penalties and a nice and safe option. Werner, I mean, could you really pick Timo Werner? Not sure, although he does, of course, have a good fixture. Nicholas Jackson, who probably not an option for right now, given other players with a double game week in 34. But Chelsea in 36 and 37, I believe, are going to double. 2 double game weeks for Nicholas Jackson. He could well be an option. I mean, Semenyo and Muniz, we've got a situation at the moment where there are 2 forwards that are under 5 million that are in really decent form. And Semenyo particularly doubles in game week 34. Muniz, I think, is a good option, flatline regardless as well. So yeah, if you're looking to save a bit of cash, restructure your team, you can't really go wrong with those 2. And then Fofana and Darwin Núñez round off the forwards for game week 32. And a quick look at the next 3 game weeks. I mean, it's quite interesting to see Haaland leading the way, even though he doesn't double in game week 34. That suggests to me that when we get to game week 34, it's probably worth just starting him. I do have a feeling that Brighton away could be a really good fixture for Haaland. Solanke, Semenyo, Darwin Núñez and Mateta, they're all up there, obviously, with their double game week in 34. Interesting to see Semenyo having higher expected points than Darwin Núñez. I don't know how I feel about that. Let me know in the comments what you think. Mateta, I mentioned Semenyo and Muniz as good sub 5 million forwards. Mateta's probably up there too, to be fair. Starting every game for Crystal Palace. I believe he's probably not their penalty taker, actually. I was about to say their penalty taker, but it's definitely Eze or Elise that will take them. 4.9 million for a Crystal Palace forward. Unfortunately, the next 2 fixtures would kind of put you off. But then the double in 34 is pretty good for Palace. And then we see Isak, Fofana, Jackson, Muniz and Tony, single game weekers in 34. A quick look then at the clean sheet odds, and we've got, well, top team for clean sheets in game week 32 is Man City. They've got 50% chance of keeping a clean sheet against Crystal Palace away. So there is no team that Drafthound is backing more likely than not to keep a clean sheet. See Everton, 42%. They've got Burnley at home. That's a pretty decent fixture. Although I would say Burnley seem to have found a bit of form. I guess Everton have recently too with their result against Newcastle. Chelsea, 40% to keep a clean sheet against Sheffield United. Likewise, Tottenham, 40% against Forest. Tottenham just look very leaky though. Not sure I necessarily agree with that. I do expect them to concede. But ultimately, I guess, if you're 40% likely to do something, you're still more likely to concede than not, right? Arsenal 36% against Brighton and Villa 33% against Brentford at home. Usually I say any teams below 30% to keep a clean sheet, I wouldn't start their defenders from. But looking at that, I think Liverpool defenders, you could well start. Wolves, possibly. I think if you've got Nori, I don't mind him starting him against West Ham. I could conceivably keep a clean sheet. And also Bournemouth defenders as well. Yes, Luton away is a tough fixture, but they're decent, I think, defensively. Not amazing, but decent. And Luton got so many injuries at the moment, you don't know what you're going to get with them. So that's probably where I'd look in terms of defences. I'm just going to come at you with a couple of sources of expected points data for captaincy. Like I said, I think there are genuinely 4 players in Game Week 32 that you could quite comfortably stick the armband on. And actually, given he scored a hat-trick in Game Week 31, Phil Foden probably on the list too. Although I'd say I'd back these guys as 4 penalty takers ahead of Foden. Palmer leads the way in terms of expected points for Drafthound. Son in 2nd place. Salah in 3rd, Haaland in 4th, and then we see Brennan Johnson up there as well. I'd say wouldn't really want to captain Brennan Johnson. I think it's between the 4. Draft Hound is saying Cole Palmer. I've also brought you the FPL review expected points. That's a completely different order. Quite interesting. Salah leads the way, 6.8. Son on 6.5. Haaland on 5.8. And Cole Palmer on 5.5. What I'm going to do next is similar to what I did if you watched my previous Ultimate Guide video. I put together a set of stats where we compare player stats and fixture stats to determine the best captain. And I'll show you that next. I thought it'd be useful to compare the players in terms of captaincy through a couple of means. Number one being how they compare with one another in terms of their stats across the season individually, and then how the quality of their fixtures compare. So what I've done is put together all their attacking stats for the season, and then also the defensive stats for the teams that they're facing. Looking at the stats at the top, I think there are 2 clear leaders, Salah and Haaland. Over 1 expected returns per 90 for both of them. And then Palmer and Son are very good, just not quite there, 0.78, 0.61 respectively. Although Son always outperforms his underlying data. You can see there 15 goals from basically 9 XG. That's the kind of elite finisher that he is. So I'd probably put a little bit more weight behind the actual stats and expected returns per 90 for Son than the other players. So I think Salah and Haaland are my 2 favourites in terms of stats. Palmer and Son slightly lagging behind. When you look at the fixtures then, so Son has got Forest at home, Haaland's got Crystal Palace away, Salah has got Man United away, and then Palmer has got Sheffield United away. Now, comparing the 4 defences, you can see there Sheffield United have conceded the most goals, followed by Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, and then Man United. When you look at expected goals conceded across the season, Sheffield United are the worst team. Man United are the 2nd worst team on this list, 53.31 expected goals conceded across the season. And this is before they've actually played in Game Week 31 as well. Crystal Palace 47.29 and Forest 45.79. So in terms of expected goals conceded, Forest are actually the best defence in the league. Man United, their expected goals conceded is 53 and they've only conceded 40. I think Onana's had an absolute blinder this season, by the way, and I don't know how they've made up those numbers so well. Surely that kind of defensive run for them is going to come to an end at some point, and the numbers will revert to those expected goals conceded at some point. And then also, I'm conscious some of these teams have had manager changes recently, brought players in, players have gotten injured. So looking at the stats across the whole season doesn't necessarily tell like a recent story. So what I thought would be useful is to look at the expected goals conceded for the last 5 as well. And the worst team, Sheffield United. 2nd worst team, Man United. Haaland is the 3rd worst. You've got the Crystal Palace are the 3rd worst. Obviously, that's Haaland's opponent. And then Forest, 8.14, are the best in terms of expected goals conceded for the last 5. So when I look at this, I think there are 2... The captaincy for me is between 2 players, and it's Salah and Cole Palmer. And I think Salah wins in terms of stats. Cole Palmer wins in terms of the quality of fixture. Both are away, so there's not a massive home/away differential. I'm pretty sure I heard a stat on TalkSport this afternoon, right? And they said in the last 30 teams that have played away in the Premier League, the last 30 games, only 1 has actually won, which is just crazy. Shows the current power of being the home team. I don't know. Home and away is kind of a thing, so that gives Son a factor in terms of being at home. Still, for me, I think it's between Salah and Cole Palmer. And I think I'm yet to decide who I want to captain, but I think it's between those 2. With all that information I've just given you, I'd be interested to know what your opinion is. So let me know in the comments who you're going to captain. And finally, I thought it'd be useful just to talk through 3 players that you might want to bring into your team for Game Week 32. My first one is Ait-Nouri of Wolves. Just looks to be absolutely nailed on in that Wolves 11. He actually played as the left winger for them in Game Week 31. He's got a nice run of fixtures coming up, barring Game Week 36, but that's quite a way in the future. He's obviously got the double in 34. 5 attacking returns in his last 6 games. It's just crazy. And I think you could start him every game week, pretty much, apart from that Man City one. Wouldn't be worried about putting him in my team for each of them because, I mean, outside of Arsenal defenders, the way to pick defenders, in my opinion, isn't about backing clean sheets. It's about picking the ones that are most likely to get attacking returns. And at the moment, I'd say Ait-Nouri is one of the best attacking defenders in the league, so he is definitely a transfer target. I mentioned when I talked through the goalkeepers that I think David Raya is probably the best goalkeeper in FPL right now, and I think that's the case. Arsenal seem to be the only team that you can actually back to keep clean sheets week on week. And obviously, David Raya's reaping the full reward of that. I'd also say, rather than, I imagine most people have Gabriel or Saliba as their single defender, right? Probably Gabriel. I think Gabriel's the best defender in FPL, so I'd imagine most people have Gabriel. If you're looking to double up on the Arsenal defence, rather than buying Saliba or Ben White, who are sort of at the upper end of the 5 million price category, maybe you could just get David Raya instead, because it saves you a bit of cash. And ultimately, he's going to pick up a very similar level of points, because whenever those guys keep a clean sheet, obviously David Raya will too. Just in general, it's slim pickings in terms of goalkeepers, right? And with David Raya, you know, Arsenal step it up in the big games. They've proven they can keep clean sheets against Man City. So you could start him every week, even if he has a tough fixture. And of course, he's got a double in 34. And you look at those fixtures coming up. The only game that I would rule out an Arsenal clean sheet in is probably the Tottenham fixture. All the rest of those, I genuinely think Arsenal could keep a clean sheet in. So just one to think about. I think David Raya is a good transfer in if you can get to it. I'll just offer you a Raya alternative if you can't quite afford him. I think Neto is also a perfectly decent goalkeeper. Doesn't quite keep as many clean sheets as Arsenal do with Bournemouth, but they're still decent. 28 games, 7 clean sheets, that's 1 in 4. That's a lot better than some other teams are managing this season. And he's also really good for saves bonus. He makes 3.61 saves per 90, which basically means he picks up saves bonus points pretty much every time he steps out onto a football pitch in FPL. And like I said, when going through the goalkeepers, my favourite goalkeepers in the game, and traditionally the top scoring keepers, are the ones that keep like an average amount of clean sheets, but they make saves bonus every single game. And Neto kind of falls into that price category. And when you look at, he's got a double game week in 34. Not saying he's going to keep a clean sheet every week, but if you're looking for an alternative to Raya, I think he's the next best thing. Alright, and that's the end of the video. Quite a lot to get your teeth into there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a like rating. You can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there at some point. If you want to see more content from me, and of course, let me know in the comments who you're going to captain. That's the big talking point for me. Who is the best captain in Game Week 32? Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.